According to American philosopher Jack Handy, the face of a child can say it all, especially the mouth part of the face. But what if dozens of those faces stepped forward, each telling the same bizarre tale of a landed, disc-shaped craft, little grey beings, and psychic visions of man-made environmental devastation of apocalyptic proportions? Would you believe them? In 1994, a small town named Ruwa in Zimbabwe became ground zero for such an event. Over 60 schoolchildren recounted the same unsettling experience in horrifying detail. And even now, as grown-ass adults, maintain that this was no playground fantasy. It really happened. And some are still struggling to pick up the pieces of their shattered lives, nearly 30 years later. But was it all just a mass delusion? Some sort of prank? Or could it be that extraterrestrials came down to warn these children about our planet's grim future?
Thanks, Washbrook Show. Welcome back to episode number 29 of Super Mystery Bros, the show where we take a select mystery and treat it like we caught it breaking into our house. My name's Nate, and with me again for the second time in a row is Ivan. Ivan, how are you, man?
Doing good, man.
Yeah? What's new?
Not much.
Not much. All right, well, thanks for that. Real quick, though, if you've noticed, we're about a week late on this episode because I got sick last week. But I'm feeling better now, and I'm ready to bring another mystery to justice. Ivan, is there anything that you want to say or talk about first before we get into this?
Yeah, I'm excited to be back and to talk about this mystery, so let's just get it started, I think.
All right, well, before we begin, I do have a question for you. What is it that our listeners can do if they'd like to support us in our attempt to make contact with the alien world of the unknown? I know it's a hard one.
It's a hard one. It's a hard one. What can I do? It's hard.
Why don't you start with the basics? The basics?
The basics. Is always just give us some feedback, guys. Feedback is always welcome because that way we can improve our podcast.
We're just firing off this show into the ether, and if nobody's saying shit, we don't know if we're good or bad or we suck or we're great.
So feedback is important. So whether you like us or you hate us, just let us know,
Yeah.
Let us know. On whatever platform you use. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube guys out there.
Yeah, if you're on YouTube, hit the thumbs up or the thumbs down. Leave a comment. Any comment, even if it's like a period or your favorite letter of the alphabet, just do it.
Yeah.
And let somebody you know about our show. And if we have any NASCAR listeners, they can put our show's cover art on their race car and help to get the word out. All right, man, is there anything that you want to say up front before we kind of get into this one?
Why are you guys into NASCAR?
I don't know, dude. I'm not into NASCAR, but
yeah, okay.
We call them circle jerks.
Yeah, I remember playing that game on the computer, when
just one giant left turn.
Freaking take 100 of laps and shit, It was tough game. Anyway.
All right, guys. Real quick before we begin, though, our main source for this episode is going to be a documentary called Ariel Phenomenon, spelled Ariel, along with some minor sources, which we're going to call out along the way as we go, just so that Ivan doesn't bitch at me. Are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
All right. Space. Nowadays, it's commonly known as the final frontier, or simply as a place where nobody can hear you scream. But long before humanity began to even etch its history into stone, our ancestors looked up into the vast cosmos and surely pondered this truly profound question. Is there anybody out there? Or are we just trapped on this bitch of an earth all alone? The answers they sought, however, would tragically never come. But millennia after millennia would come and go, that is, until man-made horrors beyond comprehension had finally come into existence by the first half of the 20th century. Death and destruction had rained down over entire cities, possibly catching the eye of some unknown and shadowy group of beings from a place where no man has gone before. The last ashes of the Second World War had barely begun to cool off before the skies over our heads were filled with a new form of terror in the mid-20th century. The innocuous acronym UFO morphed in meaning from a mere anomaly in the sky to a cryptic symbol which hinted at a reality far more unsettling than anyone dared imagine. Visitors from another world had finally arrived from a world far beyond the Earth, possessing both the intelligence and technology to traverse the incomprehensible vastness of the cosmos in the mere blink of an eye. Mankind had seemingly opened up Pandora's box and caught the attention of someone or something from the great beyond. Tales of encounters with these so-called extraterrestrials were few and far between at first, but quickly spiraled into a full-blown pandemic by the second half of the 20th century. No longer were these just mysterious objects in the sky. Horrifying details began to spill forth. Small, gray figures with small, spindly bodies, clearly not of this world. Harsh lights glinting off of long needles, wielded by these emotionless creatures. Their large, black, almond-shaped eyes seemed to pierce through the terrified souls of those who lay paralyzed and helpless on top of a cold operating table. Across dozens of countries, ranchers began to find the lifeless bodies of their livestock, drained of blood and their flesh sliced with inhuman precision. Tongues, ears, and other organs vanished, while the remainder of their mutilated bodies were being discarded callously in fields like jack-in-the-box wrappers on a Fresno sidewalk. These so-called alien visitors, some warned, weren't here to assist mankind in its quest toward enlightenment, but rather were using mankind as mere guinea pigs in some sort of mysterious alien agenda. Cruel and inhuman medical procedures were being carefully performed on those who were unfortunate enough to have their rectum land in their crosshairs, including, but not limited to, what some have described as nothing short of a full-blown anal assault involving long, invasive, probe-like instruments. But as the shocking truth about these alien visitors emerged, only one question remained. Should we be concerned if they try to come into contact with our children? To the parents of over 60 school children in Ruwa, Zimbabwe, that question has gone completely unanswered for nearly 30 years. Until tonight. So real quick before we get into the meat of this mystery, why don't you give us a quick rundown on where this all takes place?
According to some Wikipedia information and the Polymatter YouTube channel, a landlocked country in southern Africa and home to the world's largest waterfall, Victoria Falls, and to some of sub-Saharan Africa's most famous animals such as lions, leopards, rhinos, elephants, and buffalo. Zimbabwe is a land of stunning beauty and breathtaking savannas. Rich in natural resources, Zimbabwe has a complex history. Colonized by Britain in the late 800s, when it was known as Rhodesia, right? Yeah. It gained independence in 1980 after a long and bloody war against white minority rule, which caused roughly 2/3 of its white minority population to leave the country within the following decade alone, with a greater decline later. Robert Mugabe, the newly elected and fearless leader of this new nation of Zimbabwe, who is known for his unparalleled integrity and genius political policies, led Zimbabwe into a golden age of prosperity, by the mid-2000s, which turned most people in the country into multi-trillionaires almost overnight. That's fake news, man. However, deep in the heart of this great and powerful nation lies one of the world's most perplexing cases of alien contact. A close encounter of the third kind. So shocking that you'll say, "Нихуя себе, блин." But tonight, we take you to a comfy little town situated just 22 kilometers southeast of the bustling capital city, Harare. Ruwa, Zimbabwe, is a humble little town which spans only about 40 square kilometers. Rolling grasslands and patches of woodlands dot the surrounding landscape of this semi-rural area. However, this tiny town would be known for little or nothing, if not for a spectacular event which may or may not have taken place just outside an otherwise unremarkable primary school about 30 years ago. An event so baffling that even now, those who lived through it struggle to make any sense of it.
A warm breeze rustled through the dry savanna grass near the Ariel Primary School on the warm Friday morning of September 16th, 1994. The time was about 10 a.m., and the children of Ariel School in Ruwa, Zimbabwe, all between about the ages of 6 and 12, were outside for an extended recess, the girls playing patty cake and jump roping, while the boys were out kicking soccer balls around and probably throwing dirt clods at each other. Meanwhile, just inside the school, the teachers were all sipping on their morning coffee and attending some boring-ass faculty meeting, blissfully unaware and none the wiser that anything was afoot. Sunshine beamed down onto this little slice of heaven on earth. The birds were chirping, the children were playing, and despite having just one chance at life, all of them were born just in time to experience the magic of childhood in the 1990s. Little black kids and little white kids alike stood hand in hand as brothers and sisters, and the schoolyard bullies dished out wedgies and noogies, not based on the color of their victim's skin, but by the content of their character. It was by all accounts Martin Luther King Jr.'s dream in action. So just for context here, the Ariel School was, and it still is, it's like a private school for mostly wealthy kids. So, think school uniforms and parents who actually view school as a place for their kids to be educated and not just babysat, right? This school, it was also mixed race. So a mixture of mostly white British kids and black Zimbabwean kids. So accounts kind of differ slightly from kid to kid on what happened this day, so you're going to have to kind of forgive us as we're just going to describe the event as it happened based on kind of a totality of what most of the eyewitnesses claimed happened. And the sources of the following information are going to include the Daily Mail and the documentary Ariel Phenomenon. So, Ivan, why don't you take it away here?
Dozens of kids were outside playing during their special extended morning recess, when suddenly, all hell broke loose. A shiny glint in the sky caught some of their eyes. Many of the survivors described hearing a buzzing type noise that some described as similar to a power station or a swarm of bees. This silvery craft, described by many of the children as having colored lights around it, flew across the sky and began to descend and land into a field on the outskirts of the school just beyond the playground. Word about the mysterious object began to spread amongst the children like a wildfire, and dozens of them scrambled towards the edge of the playground for a better look. More and more children began to rush over to see what all the others were pointing and staring at. As children looked on in the bewilderment, some were crying and some were thrilled, but all were shocked and horrified by what they saw next. Emerging from the landed craft, according to many of the students, were multiple short, strange-looking beings dressed in black clothing, which had emerged from within the bowels of the craft. One of the children said that the clothing reminded them of the diver's wetsuit, and most described the beings as having large, black, almond-shaped eyes with pale skin. Many children described the movement of these beings as being graceful, weightless, gliding, or fluid, not jerky, almost as if they were in slow motion, or like a less extreme version of astronauts walking on the moon. Depending on which witness you ask, there were between one and several of these beings, but the most common number cited has been 2. One being which stayed near the craft, and one being which began to approach the children.
Jesus Christ, how horrifying, man. Decades later, as a grown-ass man, Nathaniel Coxall, who was in grade 7 at the time, told the documentary Ariel Phenomenon, quote, "There was a big group of kids, sort of gathered at the bottom of the playing field, pointing and making noise and shouting and screaming, and I went up to them to sort of see what was going on, to try to, calm everybody down. My initial thought was that somebody had hurt themselves or something," end quote. Liesl Field, who was a grade 4 student at the time, told the documentary, quote, "I remember seeing 2 flashing lights, and I saw like a big silver, like a saucer kind of thing that was hovering, and then it landed or hovered on a stone, and I saw 2 figures come out, really black, but their face, you could actually see not much of their face, but it was actually really, really white in color," end quote. Another witness, Robert Medcalf, who was in grade 2 at the time, went on record as a grown man and told the documentary, quote, "I suddenly realized that he's not quite normal. I didn't actually know about UFOs or aliens at the time. I just thought it was a strange person. The being's eyes were almost like rugby balls or American footballs, with huge eyes on the side of his face," end quote. Other former students have described the beings as looking like they were made of plastic or someone who has had too much Botox. Most, if not all of the children, described the figures to be child size in height. So basically, what these children are describing are kind of the classic gray aliens, and weirdly enough, some of them actually described it like they were blinking in and out of existence. Do you remember when they were talking about that?
Yeah, I do.
Like some of the kids said that they would look at the alien and then it would just like disappear and kind of like reappear in like another location. Really fucking weird. But anyway, why don't you move on, man?
Fear and panic soon spread among the crowd of children. Some reported that they received telepathic messages which warned of impending environmental doom, that mankind was mistreating the planet. Liesl Field, in particular, reported in initial interviews that she saw visions of the earth with trees falling down, people dying, and with no air to breathe. And she was not alone in this. Others reported to be transfixed on the being's eyes. Although horrified, they found it difficult to look away, and they seemed to convey the same message of impending environmental catastrophe at the hands of an apathetic mankind, a message conveyed entirely non-verbally. All in all, the event was estimated to have lasted about 10 or 15 minutes in total, but eventually the crowd of children began to run away screaming. According to Lisa Field's childhood account, quote, the children... It's not a quote. It's not a quote. The children, ran to the office and told the teachers who were in the middle of their staff meeting, but were told that it's probably nothing, which made her feel sad, because she insists that they did, in fact, see something.
Yeah, so basically, the teachers, they just tried to poo-poo it all and tell the kids that they didn't actually see what they claimed to have seen, and that it was just all basically nonsense. So the parents of the children weren't much more receptive to the claims than the teachers were. Some of the parents chose to dismiss their children's claims, and some of them chose to believe them, and some demanded answers from the school faculty who are incapable of providing any. The MUFON Continental Coordinator for Africa, MUFON, which stands for the Mutual UFO Network, Cynthia Hind was the first quote-unquote professional to get word of the incident and come to the scene to investigate, which by some accounts was the very next day, but that didn't really make sense to me because the next day would have been a Saturday, And I'm not sure if Zimbabwean kids go to school on Saturday or not. So it was either Saturday or the following Monday. But anyway, after extensive interviews with the children, she concluded that the event was entirely real and that the children indeed saw what they said that they had seen, but added that some of them may have been influenced by what some of the other children said that they saw. Tim Leach, who was a veteran BBC reporter and cameraman with experience covering wars and shooting footage of combat in African civil wars, soon got word of the story, but quickly realized he was in over his head. Cynthia Hines soon put him in touch with Dr. John Mack, who was an expert in both adult and child psychology, and was a professor of psychology and the head of the psychiatry department at Harvard University, as well as a Pulitzer Prize-winning author, who immediately agreed to fly to Zimbabwe as soon as he could. So for context here, it's kind of important to provide kind of a disclaimer. Dr. John Mack had recently, and by recently I mean the early 1990s, began researching the subject of alien abduction. So he was both kind of interested in the subject matter, and he also had some prior experience with it already. And he had recently published a book on the topic. So keep that in mind as we move forward here.
So he published the book before coming to Zimbabwe?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Soon after arriving in Zimbabwe, Dr. John Mack held a group meeting with all the teachers at the Ariel School to pick their brains and find out how they felt about the whole thing. Their reactions to the children's account, however, were mixed. Some teachers chose simply to not believe the children's story, but others believed them due to their panicked state and seemingly authentic emotions. One teacher said on camera that she believed that because they all came running and screaming in unison, that even if they staged it, they could not run all together like they did. One teacher thought that due to the talks on meteorites falling from the sky the previous day, it entered into their heads and they made the story up. Another teacher didn't believe the stories at first until she saw the drawings that children made. Although the stories were all slightly different, the drawings were all very similar, meaning to her that the children all saw the same thing.
Yeah, so I found it kind of interesting that the male teachers tended to poo-poo it all, while the female teachers were a little bit more open-minded and they tended to believe the children more. Did you notice that when you watched the documentary?
It's interesting. I didn't.
Maybe you didn't notice that, but that's one thing I noticed when I listened to them talking about it, like just the teachers with Dr. John Mack, was that there was a male teacher and then the male headmaster. They were both skeptical of the children's claims, and then all the women kind of were a little bit more open to believing the children. So
do you have any opinion why?
I don't, but I just thought it was a little interesting. Why don't you continue on?
Most noteworthy about the event, perhaps, is not the fact that dozens of kids claimed that UFO landed and aliens got out and approached them, but it's the emotional effect that it had on the children, clearly visible on their faces during the interviews that John Mack recorded. Many children were deeply troubled by the incident, and most admitted to being frightened by the encounter. According to some of the accounts, the children were afraid that the aliens might come and take them or hurt them. According to the headmaster, one 12 or 14-year-old kid was so disturbed by the incident that he and his parents had to take him back to Canada, and he was no longer able to sleep at night.
All right, so let's just roll a couple of clips from John Mack's interviews that he took with a couple of the school kids.
You've talked with the BBC people and with Nikki Carter here before, right?
Yes.
Okay. But the experience is still fresh in your mind, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. What were you doing at the time?
Well, I was playing in the playground, and then we saw something silver, and then we quickly ran to the logs, and we saw a silver thing, and we saw a man standing next to it.
And what did he look like?
Well, he had big eyes that pointed.
Pointed big eyes.
Yes.
Can you, maybe you could just draw the head. Do you like to draw?
Yes.
Okay, put the chair up a little bit. No, these are what? What are you drawing here?
The eyes.
The eyes, okay.
And I couldn't see his nose and his mouth, but his nose was pretty small.
So the eyes were large, is that right?
Yes.
Did you look into the eyes? I mean, did you have a sense that you were
No, all we saw was his eyes. They were black.
black? But like, were they looking at you, or were you at him?
It seemed that he was looking at all of us. And I didn't see anything over there.
No nose. You didn't see a nose.
No. My heart kind of went faster and then slower and then faster and then slower, all at the same time.
Now, was that was excitement and
Yeah, excitement and scariness.
and scary and well, you said happy too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Happy because
I saw something strange and something peculiar and something nobody had ever seen.
Haley, something scared you. Is that right?
Yes.
What scared you?
The noise.
What noise?
The noise that we heard in the air.
You heard a noise in the
Yes.
air? What was it like? Like a roar or a buzz or a hum or what kind of a noise?
It was like someone was blowing a flute.
And that scared you?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And what did you do when you were afraid?
I ran away from it. We told the teacher, but she said just forget about it.
Dr. Mack concluded that the children were talking about a phenomenon that occurred in physical reality. The stories were consistent, and the way they talked about it left no question in his mind that what happened was what they said happened. According to him, their collective experience had all the hallmarks of an authentic experience.
Several of them talked about a message being transmitted through the eyes, that the beings were trying to tell us something. What gave that a certain edge of sincerity was they weren't offering solutions, like we've got to become environmentally conscious and, do something about the earth. So I'd say, well, what are we supposed to do? And they would say, well, no, that's not what they were doing, what they were conveying. They were simply telling us that this is what's going on, and they felt very upset about it. But it wasn't like a, ecological political program or something. So that gave it a kind of authenticity. We came away convinced that an extraordinary event occurred here, one of quite unique, I think, in UFO history. If there's anything that could convince a skeptical, closed-minded public that some kind of intelligence that is not, as the headmaster said, of this world, then this event should persuade people.
The so-called scientific community, however, were outraged by Dr. Mack's conclusion, and many proceeded to publicly shit on him. Hard. He was accused of being a crackpot, a pseudoscientist, unprofessional, unqualified, you name it. However, despite calls for his position at Harvard to be revoked and the constant harassment and ridicule from his fellow academics, members of the media, and ordinary people alike, he never wavered in his conviction and continued to be the voice for the voiceless children, who, in his eyes, were not only telling the truth as they knew it, but telling the truth as it actually happened that day. It led him down somewhat of a rabbit hole, which caused him to pursue the subject of alien abduction even further. So, in an article written in The Lancet by Niall Boyce, dated September 29th, 2012, he wrote the following passage, quote, "It was, to his colleagues, an astonishing departure. Quote, he influenced me in many ways, Edward Kantsian, who was Mac's friend and colleague, said. But I could not go down that path. It was a painful aspect of our relationship that I never entirely resolved," end quote. Harvard instituted a review of Mac's position in 1994, but he fought back and retained tenure. His professional reputation, however, was severely damaged. Quote, "He's not taken seriously by his colleagues anymore," end quote. Arnold Relman, emeritus professor at Harvard Medical School, told the Los Angeles Times in 2001. Mac also faced fierce criticism from outside the academic community. Journalist Donna Bassett posed as a so-called abductee and made public made public details of a session during which Mac apparently believed her story of being kidnapped by aliens during the Cuban Missile Crisis and witnessing a conference between Khrushchev and Kennedy held aboard a spaceship. So it's important to note here that Dr. Mack started out investigating the phenomenon of alien abductions in the early 90s, as I said before. And this would have been before the Ruwa incident occurred. And he was skeptical of it at first until he began interviewing these abductees, for lack of a better word. And he kind of began to believe that there was something real happening to these people. And basically, you know, his peers, his colleagues, and all the people that are in his field of psychology started kind of shitting on him en masse for what, you know, they kind of perceived to be his eagerness to believe it. And they kind of considered him to be just kind of taking their stories at face value without scrutinizing them enough, if that makes sense. So that about covers the story itself. So why don't you start by kind of going over some of the most common non-alien theories that float out there. So just to be clear, we're only going to go over the theories that are non-alien in origin. Mm-hmm. And then we're going to come back later and conclude our story.
Okay, so the first theory is the mass hysteria theory. And we're going to read a couple of excerpts from the article, Episodes of Mass Hysteria in African Schools, a Study of Literature by Dimobli Kokota. Hopefully I pronounced it correctly. Okay, let's go. Quote, mass hysteria is the common term used to describe a situation in which various people all suffer from similar unexplained symptoms. Hysterical contagion consists of a quick dissemination within a collection of people of a symptom or a set of symptoms for which no physical explanation can be found. Mass hysteria typically begins with when an individual becomes ill or hysterical during a period of stress. After this, initial individual shows symptoms. Others begin to manifest similar symptoms. Symptoms recorded during outbreaks of mass hysteria include abdominal pains, chest tightness, dizziness, fainting, headaches, hyperventilation, nausea, vomiting, palpitations, anxiety, conversion disorder, and screaming. Mass hysteria is a social phenomenon, often occurring among otherwise healthy people who suddenly believe they have been made ill by some external factor. It spreads by sight or sound and occurs most often among adolescents or pre-adolescents. In groups of students, its incidence is reportedly higher among girls than boys. Symptoms often follow an environmental trigger or illness in an index case and spread rapidly by audiovisual cues, often aggravated by a prominent emergency or media response. Symptoms frequently resolve after patients are separated from each other, removed from the environment in which the outbreak began, and after being convinced that the illness is over or never existed. Literature suggests that mass hysteria episodes have frequently occurred in Africa. So basically in this article they go over many examples of mass hysteria in Africa, but we're gonna save your time, guys, and we're just gonna read one example. Quote, in 2009, a suspected case of mass hysteria struck Nimanwa Primary School in Charumbira, communal lands, and Masvinga, Zimbabwe, where pupils were reportedly screaming wildly and complaining of visions of strange snake-like creatures and lions. Parents called for the temporary closure of the Reformed Church and Zimbabwe-run institution, and some of them withdrew their children. Teachers said on average 6 pupils were affected every day. Some of the pupils would collapse, scream, or tell of visions of snakes, lions, hyenas, and crocodile, while others would behave as if they were in trance. The development forced the authorities to dispatch pastors to conduct prayer sessions at the school. The reverend confirmed the wave of hysteria at Nimanwa and blamed it on, quote, evil spirits and demons, end quote. He then assured everyone the situation had reverted to normal. Continuing the excerpt from the original article, supernaturalism has fueled most flamboyant cases of mass hysteria. More properly described, mass hysteria are cases in which groups of people act upon beliefs which gain exaggerated credence in times of social and economic distress. This is demonstrated by the study done by Kagwa of the Mekere Medical School. He studied the problems of mass hysteria in East Africa and found that such epidemics occurred commonly in schoolgirls, and the symptoms had very strong cultural coloring. People in the traditional society suspected supernatural powers when several children were affected and sought the help of the traditional healers and priests. This study shows that people in Africa are more likely to attribute mass hysteria to supernatural, such as witchcraft, Satanism, or any element which makes up their cultural beliefs. The above findings are similar to the studies of possession cults in hundreds of modern cultures from Haiti to Arctic, which reveal that people are more likely to experience disassociative trance if they already believe in possibility of spirit possession. Minds can be prepared by learning or passive exposure to shift into altered states. The anthropologist Erica Burgenon speaks of an, quote, environment of belief, the set of accepted ideas about the spirit world that members of the communities absorb, thus preparing them later to achieve the possession state.
Wow. All right. So there is a lot to unpack there, man. But I guess I wanted to know, like, I'm not sure if this one's akin to like spirit possession or like being in a trance or something like that. But do you think that this theory could plausibly explain what happened to the children on that day?
Yeah, actually, then I started doing, some sort of research for this episode. That was probably one of the first things that occurred to my mind, actually.
Can you kind of break that, because there's a lot of information there. Can you kind of sum it up just in a little nutshell how that would work hypothetically
in our case?
Well, just hypothetically.
Hypothetically.
This theory of mass hysteria.
Basically, in our situation, we can assume that the kids, they were like predisposed to the certain beliefs in spirits, and also in alien life and like meteorites and everything.
So
because
one thing that is important to add to this is that the day before there was, I think it was like some Russian space debris came down to Earth, and there were people reporting UFOs in the skies over Zimbabwe, but it was really just Russian space junk falling to Earth. And they'd come down to Earth in like a fireball, and people were reporting this. So it is kind of a weird coincidence that there would be this space junk being reported over the skies of Zimbabwe the very night before the children saw this UFO land,
Yeah. So they were already kind of
we're speaking hypothetically here.
Hypothetically, of course. They were already exposed to the information about like the objects from outer space and stuff like that, and it might have kind of landed just at the right place on their belief in like spirits and stuff,
Yeah.
I'm not saying that all of them believe in spirits, but I'm just saying probably there
would be a mix. I think there would be a mixed set of beliefs on this playground, because we've got native Zimbabwean kids, and then we've also got Anglo-Saxon people as well. So
that's definitely true, and it will be hard to determine like.
And when it comes to, well, I want to ask you this, sorry, before we move on, but because there's these dual sets of beliefs, you've got the native Zimbabwean kids, and then you've got the Anglo-Saxon kids, and they might not believe all in the same supernatural kind of stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
So could mass delusion still explain it if even the black and the white kids both say they saw the same stuff?
But the thing here is that they already have been together, for a long time, these kids. So their beliefs, like, for example, I don't know, white kids believes in Santa Claus.
Oh, yeah.
And the African kids believes in spirits. They might just like kind of integrate it into each other.
They're probably at least familiar with each other's beliefs, right?
Definitely. And I would say, as I was like, once I was a kid too, kids are always like, really? I think kids are always really into like supernatural stuff because it's exciting for them. So I think probably their beliefs were like kind of, integrated with each other, the beliefs of the white kids and the African kids. So it's highly plausible that, I'd say they are likely to believe in spirits and supernatural thing. And it would increase the probability of the mass hysteria, right? But also taking into account that they were really young. I think I read another article. I forgot the name of it, but anyway, and it said like allegedly something like that the younger kids they're more likely to experience the incidents of the mass hysteria. So they kind of...
It would make sense to me.
So the likelihood is higher, both because of the cultural aspect of it and plus their age, right? So I think it's quite likely that it could have happened.
Okay. All right. So do you have anything else you want to add to that, or should we move on to the next theory?
Let's move on.
Okay. All right. So the next theory that we're going to go over is the HIV puppet show theory. So in an article which was written by Gideon Reed, who describes himself as a researcher and writer on gideonreed.co.uk, he argues for the possibility that what the children saw might have just been some puppets. Quote, "There are a number of descriptions in the children's remarks that don't appear to be influenced by the interviewer, the situation, pressure to perform for the teachers, the television cameras, or the expert questioners, but that are offered spontaneously and which support the hypothesis that what the children observed were puppets. These features include gray or an unusual skin color, large head, big eyes, scrawny neck, long black hair, shiny black clothing or skin, no facial expression, stiff necks, running in slow motion, wordless communication, running up and down on top of a quote-unquote spaceship, figures hovering or not touching the ground. These features are mentioned in the television interviews with the pupils of Ariel School and in recent interviews with them as adults. Some details such as large heads and big eyes are repeated in some of the drawings they made as children. The drawings were made on the Monday morning more than 2 full days after the event that occurred on Friday morning around 10 a.m. in September 1994. In the weeks and months that followed, their collective descriptions have been spun to the point where they are today. Any media report mentioning the Ariel School will now refer to it as the landing of an unidentified flying object in a mass close encounter with alien beings. It's repeated as fact that 62 children had an identical experience, that they saw a hovering spaceship, experienced a kind of time dilation, saw teleporting oddly colored aliens wearing shiny black diving suit-like clothing, who stared at them with captivating large black unblinking eyes and delivered to them a wordless telepathic message about environmental conservation, technology, and stewardship of the Earth. Instead, I believe that there are enough details in their descriptions and drawings that map onto the puppetry hypothesis and make this a worthy, if rather less fantastic, explanation for what they saw." End quote. Gideon Reed goes on to explain that in Southern Africa, there was an NGO at the time called the African Research and Educational Puppetry Program, which went around educating children about various subjects, including a show called Puppets Against AIDS, which went around touring different areas and educating kids about HIV and AIDS in the 80s and 90s, just to name one. He also argues that humans attribute life to anything that has eyes, and that this environmental message conveyed by the so-called alien being was nothing new in this area of the world. He notes that the similarities between the alien beings that the children claim that they saw and the puppets in the AREPP shows, notably gray or unusual colored skin, large heads, big eyes, no facial expressions, long torsos with shorter legs in proportion to a human, and stiff necks. So just a note here, we're not talking about just little hand puppets. We're also talking about full-size puppet costumes that adults would wear that had these like big bulbous heads on top of their own heads. So, which from far away could resemble an alien being to someone who's not familiar with the puppet act. So one interesting thing to note here is that the AREPP puppets were purposely colored with gray skin in order to not be racially discriminatory in any way, and that gray would cater to both black and white audiences. Gideon Reed, the author of this webpage, goes on to conclude that the glinting silvery ship that the children saw may have been a vehicle parked, and from behind the tall grass, bushes, and trees, hid most of it from view, and see these people walking around with these bobble-headed puppet costumes on from a distance of about 100 to 200 meters away. The children's minds immediately just went to aliens. However, the one problem with this theory, though, is that it's unclear whether the AREPP or any other puppetry group were operating in Ruwa, Zimbabwe on this day, let alone anywhere near the Ariel School. So there's really no meat on the bone, so to speak, with this theory, because we aren't sure if there was a puppet program anywhere near the Ariel School.
And they probably would have notified the school before coming.
Of course, yeah.
guess,
And none of the teachers knew of a puppet program that was going to show up at school. So it was either, yeah, that's kind of weird. It's a huge hole in the theory, but from an outsider's perspective looking in, it's like, yeah, maybe that could be reasonable from far away. I actually saw a picture of one of these costumes, and it's like, yeah, from far away, someone wearing this costume from 200 meters away, that might look like an alien.
Yep.
Why don't you go over to the next one, man?
The Dust Devil Hypothesis. In an article written by Oliver D. Smith on astronomyufo.com, he wrote, quote, "Few of the eyewitnesses reported observing the UFO in the sky." Man, fucking too much. Continue. Instead, most described the UFO on the ground among trees in a grass area approximately 200 meters from the school playground. The humanoids were, by the way, they quote a couple of people here, guys, but if you want to know, just check the original article. The humanoids were reported to have been adjacent to or on top of the UFO. The Ariel School UFO incident has therefore been categorized as a close encounter of the third kind. The skeptics have argued that the children misidentified a prosaic phenomenon. The most novel suggestions so far are Hitherto, no meteorological phenomenon has been suggested. This is surprising considering the reports, including drawings made by the children of the UFO and humanoid plausibility, suggests a dust devil. Furthermore, there is physical evidence which supports the dust devil hypothesis. Dust devils or dust whirls are whirlwinds created when highly unstable, superheated dry air near the ground shoots upward. These updrafts of air from vortices on flat, dry ground and are made visible by dust particles they pick up. In many cases, dust devils last a few minutes before dissipating. They range in height from 1 meter to over 1,000 meters. Most notable are the reports that describe the UFO as making a whirling sound, rotating, going round and round, hovering, disappearing into the air above the ground as if it's dissipating, and strong gush of wind, One might ask how a dust devil can explain the reports of humanoids adjacent to or on top of the UFO. These reports and drawings suggest a probable, albeit mundane explanation. A tree branch with hanging fruit caught in the dust devil. One-eyed witness, Fiona, age 9, realized the humanoids could have been merely a branch or something like that. She herself reported only observing something dark on a strange object, i.e. the UFO. Another child drew what they described as a branch or the part of the alien where it was sitting. Some of the children drawings depict humanoids as branch-like objects, while at least one drawing appears to show a whirlwind. The children were about 200 meters, over 650 feet for the American listeners, from the site of the UFO, which accounts for misperceptions. One eyewitness, Guy, it's his name?
That's his name.
Age 11, described observing a humanoid with eyes low down on their face. Multiple drawings show humanoids with long or stick hair and big eyes.
What do you think about this? I was having kind of trouble visualizing what they were describing. A tree with, like a tree branch with fruit on it, caught in a whirlwind. I don't know about that.
It's
Yeah, I'm just having a little bit of trouble. I'm not saying that that's bullshit. I'm having trouble visualizing it.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine. It's looking like an alien too, right?
Yeah. Well, let's move on here. So the next theory we're gonna go over is the some fucking little douchebag kid made it all up to try to get out of class theory. In 2023, a Netflix documentary entitled Encounters interviewed one of the former students of Ariel School, a boy who is now a man named Dallin Vico. According to his account, he told some of his classmates that some shiny rock in the distance was a UFO and they actually took the bait. So according to the world's most trusted source of information, Wikipedia, because I didn't want to have to resubscribe to Netflix just to watch that bullshit, he claimed that he had never thought that this would work and was surprised by the subsequent mass hysteria. However, it is important to note that his claims in the documentary directly contradict claims that he made on camera 15 years prior to the documentary in 2008, when he described the UFO as having a light that would, quote, flash a different color in the sky, end quote. So, according to him, he made it all up and everyone believed him.
Moving on. They imagined it false memory theory. Senior staff writer James Felton argued in an article on IFLscience.com that Dr. Mark's interview technique was flawed, and that the children may have been primed to imagine UFOs and aliens due to the re-entry of mysterious Russian space debris into the Earth atmosphere just a day before the incident. Quote, despite being one of the reasons why the Ariel School incident is so widely known, Dr. Mark's interview technique was sloppy, having arrived months after the incident, meaning children could consolidate their stories in their minds. It's likely he prompted the children, perhaps unconsciously, to recall these telepathic events. Hind, meanwhile, had interviewed the children in groups of 2 to 6, making the similarity of the story details somewhat less impressive. Another problem with Hind's idea that the children did not know of typical depictions of aliens in media was that the country was in the middle of something of a UFO fever at the time. 2 days previously, the Zenit 2 rocket from the Cosmos 2290 satellite launch had re-entered the atmosphere, causing a fireball in the sky. It wasn't known that the object was by some local residents, and SBC radio.
ZBC.
Getting drunk, man. It wasn't known what the object was by some local residents, and ZBC radio had been hit with numerous calls claiming to have seen UFOs. Hind herself had learned of the incident after talking to the station herself, after a call was made about the school. End quote.
Wow, man. All right, so let's real quick just go over a couple minor theories that are still notable. So other notable theories that don't hold that much weight are that the children may have seen a helicopter, a Harrier jump jet, or even a tikalosh, which is a water spirit in local folklore. According to the world's most trusted source of information, Wikipedia, they're mischievous and evil spirits that can become invisible by drinking water or swallowing a stone. They're called upon by malevolent people to cause trouble for others. At their least harmful, a tikalosh can be used to scare children, much like in this case here. However, they can also cause illness or even death to their victims.
As an interesting side note, these tokoloshes were the explanation of Bantu folklore as to why some people who slept in rondawels at night randomly died. According to Wikipedia, traditionally, these people slept on the floor, on grass mats encircling a wood fire that kept them warm in the winter, and many would inexplicably die overnight. They never realized that it was the fire that was depleting the oxygen levels, leaving noxious carbon monoxide, which is heavier than pure air and sinks to the bottom. It was eventually realized that anyone who happened to be sleeping in an elevated position escaped the deadly curse of Tokolosh, which was described as a short man about hip high who randomly stole one's life in the night, unless they were lifted to the height of their bed.
Wow, man, that's really interesting.
Actually, that was probably the second thing that came to my mind. Not tokoloshes, I didn't know about them before, but maybe like some chemicals or some weird food poisoning or whatnot, It was the second thing that came to my mind.
Like they used the wrong kind of mushrooms or something.
Yeah, something like that.
Breakfast.
They just wanted to make some chicken soup, but added some.
We'll talk about that later.
Definitely.
All right, just put a thumbtack in that.
Yeah.
But let's go over the aftermath. So, due to political upheaval in Zimbabwe, the Ariel School students, parents, teachers, and other witnesses are now scattered across the world and continue to share their story. All in all, over 60 children reported seeing a UFO land near Ariel School in 1994, and most who speak publicly on the matter maintain their original stories. According to an article in Vanity Fair, on Monday night, September 27, 2004, Raymond Chakowski, a 50-year-old computer technician, had spent 3.5 hours at the Royal British Legion, a military charity in North London, planning a poppy drive to aid the troops, where he also aided himself by tossing back more than half a dozen pints of shandy before then jumping behind the wheel of his silver Peugeot and driving home. Just after 11 p.m., as Chakowski was coming up toward the underground station at Totteridge and Whetstone, a man stepped out into the road in front of him, having mistakenly looked to the left instead of to the right. Chakowski slammed on his brakes, but it was too late. The man flew up over the hood of the car, shattered the Peugeot's windshield, flipped over the roof before then slamming down onto the ground. The man never regained consciousness and soon would pass away. The victim, who the police learned was an American man by the name of Dr. John Mack, had been giving a lecture in London that evening and was walking back to the home of his friend whom he had been staying with while in town. In a cruel twist of fate, just mere moments before being struck and killed by the vehicle, Dr. Mack had talked in a lecture about his own father, who just 31 years prior, almost to the day, had been struck and killed by a truck while he was driving home with groceries. Dr. John Mack, who just a decade prior had given a voice to the voiceless school children of Africa and heroically stood up for them when nobody else would, was now dead at the age of 74 by the hands of a drunk driver. At Mack's funeral, many recalled one of his favorite quotes from Rilke's Letter to a Young Poet, as translated by Stephen Mitchell. It reads as follows, quote, "That is at bottom the only courage that is demanded of us, to have courage for the most strange, the most singular and the most inexplicable that we may encounter. That mankind has in this sense been cowardly has done life endless harm. The experiences that are called visions, the whole so-called spirit world, death, all those things that are so closely akin to us, have by daily parrying been so crowded out of life that the senses with which we could have grasped them are atrophied, to say nothing of God." End quote. See you on the other side, Space Cowboy. All right, man, are you ready to try and solve this sumbitch once and for all?
Let's do it.
All right, so, this is probably the first or one of the first times where I've gone into the end of a mystery that we've gone over, and I don't really know what I'm going to say. I don't know what to believe, kind of. So I wanted to kind of lean more on you and pick your brain about this, because you are a doctor after all. So, but yeah. So let's start. I do wanted to ask you what you thought of that quote from Letter to a Young Poet. Do you think that humans are cowardly for not having the courage to face the strange things that we may encounter head on, kind of at face value? That's what the impression I got from the quote was. Yeah, where humans are kind of becoming more cowardly because we're not facing these things. We're not facing them at face value. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, we're trying to come up with all of these quote unquote rational explanations for shit when maybe sometimes we can't fit it into a box of rationality. I think that's what I'm trying to get at. So that's kind of what I took from the stanza there.
I'd say probably it's something that we have to do, actually, to rationalize away some things which are too hard to explain because and unpredictable, such as death in this poem, right? Mm-hmm. Because otherwise people would just spend their days thinking about death all the time, and it would be probably unbearable, But one thing is that poem made me think of one book. I think it was called The Courage to Be, and I'm not gonna quote it, but I think I'm kind of gonna be inspired by it a little bit. So basically, I think that it's one thing to rationalize things away, like the death or some unknown stuff, and being unconscious about it. Just do it, just live unconscious life and stuff like that. Just leave it somewhere and don't think about it. Never. You
mean living in the moment, kind of, and not thinking about the past or the future?
No, just don't think about death or some things unknown and unpredictable.
Yeah,
it's one thing to make it unconsciously, and it's another thing to make a decision to, in spite of all those things, to push them kind of away, right. in spite of the certainty of death and, for example, uncertainty of when it's gonna actually happen. Knowing that, still kind of push it away and then leave. It's one thing. But I think in this poem, he accuses people of being maybe unconsciously pushing all of this stuff away. Not, and it might drain some... It might make life less meaningful that way, because if you hold some belief that you never die and everything is predictable, it might make your life kind of boring.
Well, I think what you can boil this down to is that he's saying that people don't have the courage to face the unknown anymore. They're trying to fit stuff into boxes using kind of the scientific method or something, when maybe there's stuff that's more magical out there. He's saying that, what is it? That mankind has in this sense been cowardly, has done life endless harm. the experiences that are called visions, the whole so-called spirit world, death, all those things that are so closely akin to us have been, by daily parrying, been so crowded out of life that the senses with which we could have grasped them are atrophied. So in other words, I think he's saying that humans are trading in their spirituality for, rational, scientifically minded kind of thinking. And it's kind of like a tragedy in itself.
Makes life kind of dull,
I don't want to harp on this subject too much because we still got to get to the Ariel School. But in a nutshell, do you understand what this quote is kind of talking about? And do you agree with it, or do you think that there's some flaws to it?
I mean, if we're talking about people, like I said, unconsciously pushing all the fears, death, and uncertainty away, then I agree with that quote. But at the same time, if you do it the one cannot just always think about those things. You gotta, to live normal life, you gotta push them away sometimes. Then I don't agree. But if it's talking about unconscious, just learned process of pushing all the fears and death or uncertainty away, yeah, I agree with that.
All right, so let's move on though, because we got to talk about the Ariel School.
Yeah.
So real quick, I want to know, do you have any memories from your childhood that, looking back on it, there's no way that it could have happened, but it's a real memory to you, but it's so ridiculous that there's no fucking way it really happened. Do you have one of those kind of memories? Or any of those kind of memories?
Do you have any? Because mine is a little bit different, but
okay, but I actually do, and it's kind of a stupid memory, but I'll tell you.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with G.I. Joe? The action figure.
Ninjas?
Well, the action figure, the little action figures. I mean, in Russia, you probably have Conscript Ivan or something, right? Or I don't know, Spetsnaz Ivan or something. Okay. But little soldier action figure.
Yeah.
I was probably, I don't know, 5 or 6 years old. And I remember I was playing with one and I was throwing it up in the air. And I have this memory of being in my carpeted room. My room had carpet at the time. I was throwing it up in the air. And the action figure was doing all these flips, and it landed on its feet just perfectly, in the center of the room. And there's no fucking way that could have happened just physically, but I have this memory that it did. So that's just a stupid example of a memory that I know had to have been fake, but I remember it as if it really happened.
So you threw the action figure and it landed on
straight up into the air, near the ceiling, and then it just did all these flips and then landed right on its feet.
Yeah, actually, it was supposed to bounce off and stuff.
Yeah, realistically, it would have bounced and then landed on its back.
Yeah.
Do you have any memories that you assume are false, but you remember as if they're real memories?
I mean, it's not exactly the right answer to your question, but I think it might be relevant for our story if we can go back to the Ariel School.
Yeah, go.
So basically, then I was thinking about the case. And especially watching the documentary too, it made me remember the incident. At the time I was I think I was in 2nd or 3rd grade around that time. So
8 years old?
Eight, 9, a little kid. Similar to the age of those guys, actually.
Yeah,
That's why it might be relevant. And at the time, it was a winter time, and my class and several other higher graders, maybe 4th, 5th grade guys, went to another city to spend maybe 2 or 3 weeks at the, how would you call this facility? It's like a wellness center of some sort, where they give you massage, some procedures, you drink some nice mineral water, whatever, just relax, eat good food and stuff. And I was in a room with my classmates, and I remember, because it was the time of uncertainty, the stressful time with the some, I think, terrorist attacks and some stuff like that everywhere in Russia. Not everywhere, but they were happening in Moscow and somewhere else. And it was around that time anyway. And I remember one night we were just laying in bed, and some of the kids had the freaking best idea ever. He said, guys, maybe some shit like that is gonna happen here.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, at least that's my recollection of what he said. And we were like, what the hell? You kind of for real, man? What the how do you know? He said, like, yeah, just got a feeling, kind of got a feeling. And we all started like listening really attentively. I think we were living on the 7th floor or something, and we were listening to the guards downstairs. And I remember having like kind of imagining stuff happening downstairs, some bad people trying to get in and get after us. And we were talking about it. We were just 3 of us, I think, but we were talking about it continuously. And the situation continued to exaggerate, higher and higher and higher. And then I remember the guys just fucking turned on the lights, and they stood up from their beds, and they started collecting their bags to prepare to escape. Because they
The kids did?
Yeah.
Shit.
And I was scared and terrified,
Shocked and horrified.
Shocked and horrified. I mean, I didn't believe in it, but it was kind of, yeah. So I think
it put you on edge, even if you didn't believe that it was a real thing, but just because the people around you are treating it like it's real.
Exactly. It felt.
It made it more
almost real,
Right.
almost super close to real.
Okay.
And why I remember that story, and then I imagine what if there were not 3 people, but 60 people in one room, and everyone was telling the same freaking story, like, there are some terrorists downstairs, probably they're gonna,
fuck,
get after us. What, like how the situation would escalate then, if everyone would started to pack their bags. And then maybe all the adults and maybe some like psychologists from the Moscow State University. I'm not blaming the psychologists in any way, but anyway, will come to us and like talk to us. So tell me about those terrorists, guys. So tell me about them. Like probably like most of the people would say like some hypothesis. It's just a hypothesis, right? They would be like, we thought about we saw some black figures downstairs. We started collecting our bags and everything. And yeah, and then we went we would go on national TV or something with that story. And, probably it's plausible. It's possible that we could have all believed in it, to be real like that.
And if you started talking to like some other people about it, and then they started to talk about some other people, it could spread kind of organically,
Yeah.
like through osmosis through this whole like area of children. Is that kind of what you're getting at?
Yeah. And if the adults are also like, again, I'm not talking exactly about the Ariel School story, but in this hypothetical story I'm telling, if the adults would support and maybe some,
like reinforce
the beliefs in that the actual like terrorists were
coming after you guys,
coming after us, and we saw them, and it's good that we like prepared the bags. I guess that many of those 60 kids, if we were like in the same room, hypothetically, right, would freaking still believe that it could have happened. That's my...
You raise some good points, actually. Yeah, you do. Yeah. I like that.
It's just a story that I thought about it.
Right, but I think there are parallels to what might have happened at Ariel School, I think.
Again, I bet the situation I guess the situation in Zimbabwe was also not super stable at the time. Probably it was kind of not super stable, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, it was. I mean, in the 80s and 90s, it was kind of all downhill. Like a steady downhill. So for Zimbabwe.
There is overall like sense of stress and stuff like that. And
I can't tell you with 100% certainty, but I would imagine, yeah.
Just I'm just guessing, And so the situation in Russia was like on the TV and everywhere people were talking about, I think,
The terrorists.
Around the same time the Nordost thing happened. Maybe
The what?
You remember the theater?
Oh, yeah.
Maybe not around the same time, but maybe a couple of years prior.
Yeah.
I don't remember exactly, but I just remember that there were some talks about like these things happening around, you know?
And so your argument is that because they were talking about this kind of stuff, that's what got it into your head as a kid and caused there to be not mass hysteria, but at least like a 3-person kind of hysteria from kind of like being spooked by what one other kid said.
Yeah, and everyone kind of got in onto it.
And then your argument is kind of like because there were reports of these UFOs, which turned out to be Russian space junk re-entering the atmosphere the night before. Maybe one or a couple kids started talking about that, and then that's how the seed kind of infected all of the kids' heads. You know, it kind of spread from an epicenter of maybe a few kids, and then kind of spread out from them.
Yes,
is that kind of what you're getting at here?
And you got to add to that the probably I guess again probably the higher propensity of the local population in Zimbabwe in believing in like supernatural things than in Russia, I guess. Yeah,
so I it's kind of like what I was talking about earlier though, where maybe the native Zimbabwean kids might believe in spirits, that sort of, and like, you know, they're traditional belief systems, right? But then the Anglo-Saxon kids, I would imagine, are mostly Christian, I would assume. So how would these kids who come from wildly different cultural backgrounds be able to kind of come to the same conclusion if it was all just a mass delusion?
Yeah.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But then they would come together and agree that they saw pretty much the same thing.
But you got to remember, again, no judgments here, but Christianity, they were studying in Christian school, right? I think.
Was it a Christian school? I just know it was a private school, but I don't know if it was a Christian school.
I'm not 100% sure, but I just remember in the movies, in the documentary, someone was saying that some of the kids, they were kids of the missionaries. The white kids.
Yeah.
The white kids.
Yeah. There was I know there was like a Canadian student there who was their parents were missionaries from Canada.
So
but I don't know if that school itself was a Christian school. Maybe it was, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I understand. I'm just saying that many of the Western beliefs and they also contain elements of mysticism as well. Maybe it's not the spirits, but like the God's miracles and stuff like that, you know. So, and for the little kids, I think it's probably
okay. Well, let me ask you a hard question. This might be an easy question or a hard question. I'm not sure, but why can't this be aliens? I'm not okay. So why are you automatic? I'm not like accusing you of any wrongdoing here or anything. So, but why are we trying to frame this in a psychological manner and not giving the possibility that this really was an alien encounter any weight? Why aren't you giving it any weight, or are you? Why can't this be aliens?
Yeah, it's definitely a hard one. It's not an easy question. Too many things to, you know. I would probably, because I don't think we have any like objective evidence of the existence of aliens yet, right?
Well,
we have some footage or whatever, but
not yet. But I mean,
we might have in the future. I'm not denying that, but
I mean, the universe is a huge place.
Definitely.
So
definitely, we might find something, but not yet.
And then there's also the possibility that aliens created us in their image. So
there are all sorts of possibilities, but I'm saying that taking into account the current information, you know. I wouldn't give the alien encounter
But what
too high probability. You know, I would probably give it like 1% or something, or even probably even less. But then when we consider probably less than 1, but then we consider,
is it just because it hasn't happened before yet? Is that kind of why you're not giving it like you're giving it a fair shake, but you're not giving it a very
not giving
probability.
it to high probability, and then given all the taking into account all the factors like them being like super young, like really young kids, which allegedly,
but you know, some of them were 12 or 13, and to me, that's still young, but I don't think that's young enough to just like imagine a UFO landing with aliens coming out of it. Because I remember when I was like an 11, 12, 13-year-old, just thinking back to when I was that age, I don't think that I would be too susceptible to that, you know? Because this is a little too old. Maybe as a 6-year-old, I could be fooled, but as a 12-year-old, it's like as a 7th grader.
It's really hard it's really hard to predict how the one would act in the situation like that, because the sheer mass of the people, it definitely does affect your psyche. I think if everyone is saying something, you're just like, oh,
you're less likely to question it.
Yeah, I think so, and it's really hard to put, for example, to put myself into their shoes, because I never been in that kind of situation. But it, the mass consciousness is it definitely has an impact.
To me, I don't know which direction I lean on this one. But I think I did say this when we did the Betty and Barney Hill episode, that the one thing that kind of bothers me with accounts like this is how human-like the aliens always look. You know, they've got 2 eyes, a head, a torso, 2 arms, 5 fingers, a nose, a mouth, 2 legs. They stand upright like humans. Those are the details that bother me when people talk about close encounters of the 3rd kind and 4th kind. They always look way too human-like, and I think it's more likely that people anthropomorphize these aliens. When you think about how evolution would occur on a completely alien planet that's light years away from our own, I think that aliens would not resemble humans at all. I mean, if they did, that would be a hell of a coincidence. But then the other option would be that if alien beings were so highly advanced, they could bioengineer themselves to look any way they want to look. You know, maybe they think that the way humans are constructed is more efficient. That could be a possibility, but it's still one of those things, man. I cannot get past where the aliens just look so human-like, and you imagine how life would evolve on a completely separate planet. I would not understand why they would evolve to look exactly like us. I mean, not exactly like us, but very fucking similar.
Yeah. What can I say, man? I'm getting a little bit.
No, it's fun. It's fine, man.
No. I'm saying I'm getting a little bit drunk, and it made me think about some different things.
We are recording this on St. Patrick's Day, just to for a disclaimer.
Basically, when you said that the people tend to imagine aliens to be anthropomorphic and even like have to have all the human feature, and that they would bioengineer themselves to look like us, maybe. But my argument against that hypothesis, they would bioengineer themselves to look like us only if they fought in the same categories as we do. I think that they need to look as we do to be approachable.
Yeah.
But that's, again, might be just a part of our psychic development, but for them maybe it's like kind of some weird
Or they could just play some sort of Jedi mind trick on us to make themselves look a certain way to us, just how we perceive them. But then in reality, they're just like this weird ass like blob thing.
So yeah, maybe they just live in the psychic realm and just they contacted those kids.
Who the fuck knows, man?
Maybe they contacted those kids through the psychic realm or something.
All right, so gun to your head, what do you think happened on September 16th, 1994 in Ruwa, Zimbabwe?
I say it's probably mass hysteria or like psychosis or something like that on the large scale. But again, it's not everything. It's not just like the end of the story. I think there are like many different layers to it, right? If it just was even if it just was a psychic phenomenon like a mass hysteria, or the kids, they had visions. Some of the kids, because maybe they were like more sensitive to it or something, it was for them, it was the most profound experience of their lifetime, it seems like, right?
Yeah.
And it affected their life afterwards to the large extent. And in that way, I see where the Dr. Mac, right?
Yeah.
Is coming from, in saying that some of these phenomena can have a really strong impact on us and our lives, and maybe we should be more open to it, open to this, at least in the sense that we should be more open to the others' experiences of it, right? Just like these kids, sometimes I think they felt isolated, and it made it hard for them to process. I imagine myself.
I think because the teachers kind of poo-pooed it immediately.
Yeah.
It kind of had a negative effect on them, because it felt to them like, I think it shut some of the kids down initially, because the teachers were like, "No, we're not putting up with any of this shit. You guys are just making this shit up, blah, blah, blah." Whatever, like the normal adult way to respond to this.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So I think that, I think that caused maybe a lot of the kids to maybe withdraw from the experience a little bit more, in a way that they wouldn't have been able to process it immediately.
Mm-hmm,
so it sort of lingered inside of them for longer than it should have.
Yeah, that's how I actually felt about the lady in that show, in that documentary.
Which lady?
What was her name? The one who drew the pictures, like the main characters of the documentary.
Was it the Canadian girl who?
I think so.
Who was like really disturbed by the.
I think she kind of is still trying to live through the experience, and she's kind of still there,
Yeah.
And I think sometimes people should be more open to it. It might have helped her at the time,
So let me ask you this. So let's assume for a moment that this was not just mass hysteria and that the kids actually did see something. What do you think they saw? Do you think that there was something weird in the field at all, or do you think that there was just nothing there and they were all just tripping?
You mean like a dust devil kind of thing?
Like a dust devil or a puppet, someone in a puppet costume? Or do you think, or does that not even matter to you?
There might have been some like natural thing going on, but it's not. I think you're right. In this situation, the most important is probably the intricacies of the subjective experiences of the kids. And I think probably they should have received like individual, like maybe counseling and attention, each one of them, to understand, how they processed it, because it was.
See, for me, I don't know where I land, like which theory makes the most sense to me. I mean, for all I know, maybe they did see a UFO land, but it kind of doesn't make a lot of sense, because I don't know why an alien spaceship would land and want to talk to just some random school children in Ruwa, Zimbabwe, about, the planet being harmed. It seems like they would be of more use if they landed on the White House lawn instead with this message. But who am I to question our alien overlords, man? It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So I think that something happened that was misinterpreted by the kids. That would be gun to my head. I think that that's probably what happened here. And what I mean by that is maybe someone in a puppet costume was walking, out in that field, or what else? I mean, I don't know about the whirlwind, the dust devil theory. That it's kind of weird. Or it could have been mass hysteria, because I guess it was common in the area in Africa. Cases of mass hysteria, not necessarily about UFOs, but about other stuff too.
Mm-hmm.
It seems plausible to me, but I don't want to just poo-poo the UFO theory 100% either. I still want to leave a little bit of room there for, maybe something weird did fucking happen, but I think this is going to be one of those situations where we're never going to know for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And about your hypothesis on the White House, you said like our alien overlords wouldn't land in Kremlin or White House. Maybe it's kind of smart of them, because if they do, they might have, been in trouble for that.
Get shot down with
shut down or something. So they decided
maybe they wanted to land on the White House lawn, but they kept getting targeted by Patriot missiles and shit.
So they decided,
nah, fuck that. We're gonna land in fucking Zimbabwe.
We gotta land somewhere else. And then again, you reminded me about another thing. It actually sounds like a religious experience, because when they said that the Earth is going to be destroyed by technology or something like that, and it sounds like if you listen to some of the people who are like who went to do like ayahuasca or like mushroom trips or something, sometimes they have similar visions and stuff. They would say about interconnectedness of everything and how people can impact the environment. It's like a kind of common topic of their mystic experiences.
Do you think they might have been slipped something?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that their experience was kind of religious in a way, and maybe that message was also for us and for our listeners, that we should engage less with the technologies, less.
I so wish I could engage less with technology, but I'm kind of forced to every day. So
less social media and stuff,
Well, yeah, I mean, social media. We have an Instagram account, guys. Speaking of the devil, so go follow us on Instagram.
that was the right place to put the link. We also got YouTube, so guys, follow us everywhere.
Anyway.
Basically. It's I don't know, man. I don't know.
I don't know either. I do kind of agree with you. I think that mass hysteria. Yeah, maybe. But I'm not going to say 100% on that.
I'm not saying 100% either.
I'm saying like there's still a chance that this could have been real to me.
But for me, for real, the nature of the experience is really fascinating. That they got this kind of religious experience. They
almost
got
religious,
and the messages too.
I mean, like all right. So 1994, ages 6 to 12. I would have been in this age group. So thinking back to myself in 1994, there was a lot of environmental mess. It wasn't like global warming, climate change kind of stuff like nowadays. It was more surrounded around like pollution and like air quality, that kind of stuff. So I would imagine that a hypothetical alien message, of warning to humanity, it kind of fits in the realm of like what I remember as a kid, what all the adults telling us about, we got to take care of the environment and all that shit. It's consistent is what I want to say. It's consistent. So I don't think that this is a message that they would have simply never heard of before. Like this, I don't believe that this would be the first time that they heard an environmental message that's consistent with what the so-called aliens told them. So,
but it was super vivid and emotionally charged, right?
Yeah,
with the barren earth, corpses, and it's just, it's something.
I don't know. I don't know how to explain that.
I have no idea too.
Yeah, I think we're gonna have to leave this one as maybe mass hysteria, but maybe something else. Maybe something else.
But definitely, they had super fascinating experience.
My cat is just climbing all over Ivan right now, so it's fucking funny. But anyway, is there anything else you want to say about the case of the Ariel School before we get out of here, man?
Let me think about it. Shit.
Just climbing on his shoulder.
I.
And I've got a light right above Ivan's head, and as she's climbing on his
picture now.
Yeah, I'll take a picture. Just a cloud of hair just comes up off of your shoulder. Anyway, is there anything you want to say before we get out of here, man?
Yeah, I think we could have ended the podcast with the Dr. Mac's favorite poem you recited before. I think it's...
I don't think we need to recite it again.
No, we don't need to do it again. I think it makes a good point.
All right, man. Do you have any apologies, clarifications, or shout outs to make before we go?
I need to think.
All right, think about that. But real quick, I'll go first. So I'd like to give a shout out to the Washbrook Show for helping us record another bomb ass intro. So be sure to follow him on YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram. And also, I'd like to give you a shout out because it's your birthday soon, and this is probably going to be the last episode you're going to do as a 29-year-old. So I'll see you after 30, man. You got anything?
Yeah, I got something, man. I got a couple of shout outs today, actually. First, shout out to your cat.
Yeah. For
climbing all over me, and then I'm covered in cat's hair,
Orange fur.
For orange fur. Then even my flesh card is covered in orange.
It's warming up.
Yeah. And then shout out to all my classmates, and especially the classmates we went to the wellness center with and stayed at one room. I hope you guys are doing all right. And then shout out to my dog, who we lost maybe a couple of years ago. I don't know if it's still alive. Anyway,
how do you not know if it's alive if you already lost it?
We've lost it. Not in the meaning that it
you mean it ran
dead.
Away?
I don't know, where is it?
Like it just disappeared? We have no idea what happened to it?
Yeah.
Fuck. Sorry, man.
It's okay. And apologize to... I think we already did apology to our alien overlords before, but anyway.
We have, but I think we're overdue to apologize to them again. So
yeah, if they think that we're
denying their existence, kind of.
Yeah, then sorry for that.
Sorry.
You're at least we transmitted your message here again too, take care of the environment. Otherwise, we're all screwed. We're
not trying to like, give this hippie ass message here or anything. We're not a political show, but maybe it is time we got to start thinking about that, Nah.
Okay, I think it's good enough.
All right, man. Well, let's get out of here then, man. Like sands through the hourglass, so too are the minutes of our podcast. But don't fret, dear listener. We'll be back again to breathe new life into an old mystery next time.
Помните, ребята, истина прячется в тени. Вместе мы найдем ее.
This is Super Mystery Bros.
I don't know if you remember the episode of the King of the Hill, man. There was an episode where I think Dale was kind of on edge about the. He couldn't figure it out. He couldn't put it in the head. In his head, how is it that Joseph is his son, but he had a different DNA?
Oh, yeah.
Something.
That's the one we talked about. I think that was on the Kuzbas Yeti episode we did.
Was
right?
it? Was
when
it?
we talked about this, yeah.
But anyway, and then at some point, I think in the end of the episode, Joseph was also, because Dale thought that aliens abducted his wife, right? And everything happened.
Yeah.
And then at some point, Joseph got also convinced that he was an alien, actual alien living on Earth.
Yeah.
And he wanted to go back, he wanted to go back to his, alien parents or whatnot, alien relatives. And he went, did he go to Texas or Arizona or somewhere in the desert, the place where allegedly the alien lights are supposed to be seen.
Uh-huh.
And he went there to look for the lights. And then Dale, while he was on the way, I think Dale realized just how much he loved his son, Joseph. And he went after him. And then he ran on the field to find him. And they shared a beautiful moment there where when Dale and Joseph, they just hugged each other and everything, they realized that they are family, It could have been one of the moments like that. I think we're not gonna put it in the show though, man. That's just too much. Just leave it.